Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Happy Friday, I think is usually how we say it. But glad to have you all here for this discussion this morning. I think it's going to be amazing. We're going to hear about a topic that I think is on the minds of a lot of people, but not often expressed, I think, openly in the discussions around energy transition. So I think it's very critical, actually. In particular, when we discuss energy transitions, there's a lot of discussions about how to abate carbon emissions, how to reduce CO2 footprints of energy activities, et cetera. New energy technologies, all of the above. One of the things that's often left out of the conversation, however, is the role that offshore oil and gas exploration can play in achieving a lower carbon footprint. One of the things I think that a lot of people who aren't familiar with the industry don't really fully understand is how massive a consumer of high tech the offshore industry is. It's something that's really underappreciated, and I think bodes well in terms of how the oil and gas industry, the energy industry more generally, will be able to grapple with reducing carbon emissions, simply because that knowledge base around those assets in the offshore are a tremendous advantage when we think about anything to do with transitioning energy systems and thinking about how technology can play a role going forward. So today we have three wonderful speakers. I'm going to leave the introductions up to my colleague, Benigna Ruiz. She is a fellow in Latin American Energy here at the Center for Energy Studies and formerly was a general director of Chevron in Mexico. Benigna, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to you.
Thank you so much, Ken, for that introduction. And I'm so happy to be here this morning, because we have this great opportunity to be having this conversation among these wonderful executive women from the oil and gas industry. It's a very special occasion, and I'm very pleased to have had the opportunity for them to accept to join us this morning. I'm sure you have been aware of the IEA, the International Energy Association, statements that the reduction in carbon emissions that took place in 2020 is likely to increase again as the economy recovers. It will be increasing, and we will have to deal with that fact that how are we going to manage the increase in the carbon emissions, because we want the economy to recover. So that's a major issue. At the same time, another news that took place in April from that same agency reported is that 2020 was the year when renewables capacity grew the fastest. So there is a trend here that is going to be very interesting to watch. On the other hand, we had a few days ago with McKinsey participating in a panel like this one, and they indicated that many of the energy companies are including in their objectives the risk associated with these carbon emissions and the energy transition, and they're making responsible their boards and their executives to keep an eye on the strategies to follow to actually reduce the carbon emissions to get to the net zero. And actually, even they consider having those statistics of those metrics included even in the salary of the people associated with each company. So we are very, as I said, very grateful that the three companies will be telling us at this point what are their strategies to go into the energy transition, and how their different approaches are going to work out for them, and the big role that actually oil and gas still plays. So we have to be aware that unless the oil and gas companies have a strategy to make this transition successful, it's going to be very, very important, the role that they will be playing. So our first speaker today is Elizabeth Schwartz, who is the global Liz. I have been confused with your title. I keep changing your title, so I will actually read it, so just to make sure that I say it correctly. So you are VP of Global Exploration. So she will start with a presentation from Chevron. What is the strategy that Chevron is putting in place to deal with net zero and at the same time with having high returns. So Liz, it's all yours.
Well, thank you so much, Benigna. It's a real treat to be able to work with you. Again, we worked down the hall from each other for a number of years, working Latin America, specifically the Mexico exploration geography. So again, it's a real treat to be here. I got to tell you a little bit about my background. So work from home. This is my daughter's former study room. So you see sort of shiny walls. This is kind of bright on paint, and we're just sort of lucky at the moment that it's not covered with calculus and differential equations. But it's been kind of the fun of work from home when she had to come home from college early a year ago to have this room and watch her sort of take off in her learning journey and career. But again, thank you so much for having me today and for providing this forum. As Ken said, I think, you know, as oil and gas companies, we have a real opportunity to lead into a lower carbon, bright energy future. And maybe if you can bring up our first slide, that would be great. But as Benigna said, my name is Liz Schwartz. Since 2018, I've been the Vice President of Global Exploration at Chevron. My team, my remit, we work globally to find that next barrel of hydrocarbons to contribute to the future energy supply. I'm really proud of what we do in that space and what we do as a company. But I'm also really excited about the steps and the investments we're taking to lead into the future energy mix. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that today. Next slide, please. So at Chevron, we believe in three main things. We believe energy enables modern life. Affordable, reliable energy will be needed in the future to power a growing population and lift billions of people out of poverty. As those populations grow and those people in less developed countries seek a higher standard of living, many experts forecast energy demand to continue to increase. And oil and gas, under almost all scenarios, play an important and significant role in the future energy mix, alongside incredible growth in renewables and lower carbon energy sources. We believe everyone is entitled to a clean environment, and we will play a role in addressing the risk of climate change. As we have for many years, we support well-designed climate policies. And safe and clean operations are at the core of who we are and what we do. We know in our industry that admission to operate is founded on the reputation of our company to work safely and cleanly. And we are an industry leader in protecting people and the environment. We bring that passion and commitment to the future energy space. And third, despite all the difficulty of the past year, we know that life on our planet continues to get better and better because of our human ingenuity. We believe in the power of people working together to advance the technology and innovation that are going to be needed to address some of society's highest priorities, including delivering affordable, reliable energy and addressing climate risk. And no one company or no one industry and no one country is going to develop these solutions. We're going to have to do it all together. Next page, please. At Chevron, we believe that energy demand will grow, and we believe in a lower carbon energy future, higher returns and lower carbon. We're well positioned around the world to deliver superior performance to our shareholders with our existing performance, and we are investing in the future. We have an advantaged global footprint, a diverse, strong, resilient, lower cost asset base, large scaled and long lived. We focus on assets with scale that drive efficient investment, including in reducing emissions. And as a company, we've unmatched financial strength with an industry-leading balance sheet. Our commitment to capital discipline is in our core businesses, mergers and acquisition, and in the energy transition. We believe the future of energy is lower carbon, and we intend to be a leader in advancing a lower carbon future by taking actions in 3 areas. The first is significantly reducing our carbon intensity through cost-efficient investments to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in our current operations. In 2019, we announced 4 greenhouse gas intensity metrics, and we've led the way in including all of our production, regardless of operatorship, in those metrics. And we're reporting carbon intensity separately for natural gas and oil to bring transparency to any potential portfolio effects. We've already exceeded our 2023 targets and set new goals for 2028. Our second pillar of leading into the future is in increasing the use of renewables and offsets in our existing operations, primarily through investments to grow renewable natural gas and liquids products in our downstream, but also increasing the reuse of renewable power to power upstream operations. And I'll give you a couple of examples of that later. The third pillar is investing in lower carbon technologies focused largely on carbon capture and hydrogen, but across a myriad of technologies. And we feel that we can plug in there and enable commercial solutions, leveraging our capabilities, our operations, and our scale to bring new solutions to market faster and better. Next slide, please. So lowering carbon intensity while meeting growing energy demand requires resolved advancements in technology and very thoughtful investments. And these are just some examples. Chevron is a leader in carbon sequestration, and we've invested over $1 billion in this technology. Our Gorgon asset in Australia, we've injected more than 4 million tons of CO2, giving us valuable insights in designing and operating a world-scale carbon sequestration facility. And we're entering new partnerships to explore additional technologies in the carbon capture, utilization, and storage space. We also, like I mentioned, continue to expand the use of renewable power throughout our portfolio. We started with wind to fuel our Permian operations, or some of our Permian operations, and solar in the San Joaquin Valley. And we're expanding that outside the United States into Australia, Kazakhstan, and Argentina. The goal is to deliver 500 megawatts of carbon-free power to our operations as a way to reduce our carbon footprint. We've reduced absolute methane emissions in the United States onshore by about 85% since 2013 through actions such as implementing leak detection and repair programs. And we've made great progress putting out flares and are committed to achieving zero routine flaring across our operations by 2030 in accordance with the World Bank Initiative. Next page, please. So we wanted to talk a little bit about the role of offshore exploration and offshore oil and gas in the future lower carbon environment. If we take the United States Gulf of Mexico, for example, for us, it has some of the lowest carbon intensity production in the world, really for anybody. In 2020, the carbon intensity of Chevron's production in the US Gulf of Mexico was about 7 kilograms of CO2 per barrel. For comparison, our global average as a company is around 28. And if you look at the IEA statistics, the global average for oil is about in the 40s, and for gas at 71. So the production out of the US Gulf of Mexico has a very low carbon footprint and a strong role to play in higher returns and lower carbon for our company. As we look to the future, the US Gulf of Mexico is a model, really, like I said, for higher returns, lower carbon. As Ken mentioned, a long history of technical innovation to make the impossible possible. How many discoveries in ever deeper water in the Gulf of Mexico at ever deeper depths were discovered without the technology necessarily to develop them? And the industry rallied together to develop that technology to bring production on safely and cleanly and reliably. Our facilities are efficient users of energy by design. For example, they generate their own electricity with modern, efficient gas turbines. And the ability to commercialize new discoveries, which is my passion, through existing infrastructure is there as well. We think about the infrastructure in the Gulf of Mexico, bringing on a new discovery can have a much lower carbon footprint if we bring it through an existing host rather than always building new kit. The three pictures on this particular slide, on the left, we have St. Malo, and on the right, we have Tahiti. These are two of Chevron's operated assets in the deepwater Gulf of Mexico. In the middle is the Anchor platform. Anchor is under construction and will commercialize the Anchor discovery. And it'll be the first 20K field and 20K production platform in the Gulf of Mexico. An example of bringing technology to bear to develop new resources. The quote at the bottom comes from a Harvard Business Review paper that came out recently, and it talks about how many green patents really are really have been awarded to the oil and gas industry. We're a leader in developing that technology. Next page, please. And then finally, I just want to finish my time talking about our investments in new low carbon technologies. I really find this space as a geoscientist to be super exciting as we bring our know-how with the subsurface drilling and construction to rapidly scale promising new energy sources. Recently, we've made several impactful investments. There are more than are on this slide. These are just a few. I'll only highlight a couple. Chevron Technology Ventures is our investment arm in new technology. We recently launched our $300 million Future Energy Fund 2, which will focus on innovation in industrial decarbonization, emerging mobility, energy decentralization, and the growing circular carbon economy. Geothermal power is renewable energy produced from underground heat and will be, I think, one of the vital clean energy resources as the Department of Energy states for the future. Earlier this year, Chevron announced investments in two companies. One is Ever Technologies, which produces a closed loop geothermal technology for power and direct heat. And the other is with Baseload Capital, which is a private investment company focused on the development and operation of lower temperature geothermal and heat power assets. Carbon capture, utilization, and storage technologies are going to be vital to meeting the Paris Agreement goals and net zero. Blue Planet is a company that Chevron has invested in, and it uses CO2 as a raw material for making carbonate rocks in place of quarried limestone and building material. And we're looking at other opportunities to work together. And then finally, I'll highlight Greentown Labs, which Chevron has partnered with. It's North America's largest climate tech incubator, and it's recently chosen Houston as the second global location. You may have seen them open in the former Fiesta Market next to the old Sears, which is now the Ion in Midtown, and I think that's just a super exciting development for our region. Next slide. Major oil companies can be part of the lower carbon energy future. Our subsurface characterization and injection skills for CO2 sequestration and new geothermal, production, transport, and marketing of gas for a future hydrogen economy, project management, drilling, and facilities construction to scale these technologies. We have a lot to bring to the future. Together we are stronger. Startups, academia, big industry, all working together will accelerate transition to a cleaner, reliable, and affordable energy future for all. Like everything we do at Chevron, it's about people, partnerships, and performance. Our why is delivering reliable, affordable, and ever cleaner energy to the growing global population. People drive innovation. Partnerships combine innovation with capital and know-how at scale. Performance is what we deliver for our shareholders. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you so much for that wonderful and very telling story about what Chevron is up to in terms of the energy transition. So now, as we said at the beginning, the audience can send their questions, and at the end of the presentation from our three presenters, we will review the questions and get back to the audience and to you with the questions. So the turn is now for VP, and Angelica Ruiz is the Senior VP for Latin America, and with a very interesting title of Cities and Communities. You are very involved, as your responsibilities include not only the oil and gas per se, but also the relationship with the cities. So Angelica, you have to unmute so we can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Benigna, and a pleasure to be here with Elizabeth and with Monica. And thank you very much for the invitation and the audience that is today listening to us. So for those who do not know me, I'm Angelica Ruiz. I hold two titles: Head of Country for Mexico and Senior Vice President for Latin America, like you said. So it would be great if we can have my presentation up there. Awesome, thank you very much for having it there. So let me then kick off with my first slide. Thank you. That's great. So very happy to hear, what Elizabeth said around, how Chevron is trying to tackle all the climate and energy transition issue, and also we'll be delighted to hear Monica. So I will start with what we're doing, but definitely I think one thing I will continuously enhance along the presentation is collaboration. Liz mentioned that in her previous presentation, and I think that is one key thing, regardless of what each of us are doing. So with this said, this is our strategy in a nutshell. What we're doing as BP is we have a very big ambition to become a net zero company by 2050. And the reason why we're doing this is because of the current problems that we're seeing, mainly climate change. And with that said, our reaction towards solving this situation of climate change is to produce a strategy that would lead us to net zero by 2050 with very clear milestones around 2030, 2040, and 2050. And what we will be doing is continuing our businesses that we were already doing, which are the regular upstream, downstream, and trading and shipping, but we have packaged these in a very different way. And we have added a couple of new, a very important dimension, which is clients. With that said, what you're seeing here are 3 blocks with where we will be focusing the energy production, to put it in a way. So the first block you see there is low carbon electricity and energy. What we're saying, this is one new pillar of our, not new because we were already doing this before, but the first pillar of our strategy is, as we know, the world will be transitioning into cleaner energy sources. We're moving part of our CapEx into low carbon electricity and energy production. That is solar, wind power, offshore and onshore. And it's a very specific target, which is moving from 2.5 gigas to 50 gigas. Just so you have an idea, Mexico, for example, has a capacity in power of 60 gigas. So this is a major change, and it requires that we move CapEx from other sources into this particular aim. The second one, as you can see in the right, is resilient and focused hydrocarbons. What we're doing here is we will maintain our focus in E&P, but we will reduce our production from 2.6 million barrels to 1.5. And what we're trying to do this is produce what we call resilient hydrocarbons, which include carbon pricing and include carbon capture procedures. So what we produce is net zero by 2050. The third pillar is convenience and mobility, which is in the middle. And what we're aiming here is to also include in our delivery of retail electric vehicles. So it's a huge strategy to shift in a certain period of time to EV. The other important part, which is what Benigna was saying about my title, is apart from overseeing the different businesses related to these 3 different pillars, we're also focusing in regions, cities, and solutions. And that is, we will be focusing in helping the world become net zero through cities and through corporations, which imply very strong alliances with them. We cannot partner up with all the cities in the world, but we can definitely make a choice And we have already, maybe you have heard that we have partnered up with Aberdeen and the city of Houston, but it's together in an alliance, take the city and the corporation, which I will be talking later in future slides, to the net zero ambition. So that is our strategy in a nutshell. And as you can see, we're shifting from an international oil company into an integrated energy company, which still remains, exploration remains a core part of our businesses, but we're adding up the part of renewable energy in a very strong way, plus the client vision, which means, like I said, partnering up with cities and corporations. If we can go to the next slide, please. Thanks. And here it's kind of why we're doing this. Following up on what I said, we know that 70% of emissions are CO2 emissions happen in cities. So we know if we target cities, we can achieve 40% of mitigation through these partnerships that we believe should be essential to ensure that the way cities manage or address the energy transition is successful. In the same way, we know that 79% of corporations have already signed up to reducing their emission targets by 2050, even some before 2030 or 2040. But we know that only 24% are on track to do this. So that is why we believe collaboration is key, and us as energy providers partnering up with companies from different sectors, and I will talk about this in a little while, will be essential to leading the world into the net zero ambition and to actually getting there. Because to be quite honest, 2030, well, maybe we will all be here, but maybe 2040 or 2050, there will be different people and different leadership. So what we're seeing is how can we ensure all along we measure well and we're capable of ensuring or recognizes when we're actually not getting to the targets we wanted to be. No? So that is why we're focusing in cities and corporations. Can we go to the next slide, please? So, like I said, we cannot focus apart from producing energy from the sources I just mentioned. Again, you know, we're going to be there in the upstream, we're going to be there in renewable energy, and we're going to continue being there in trading and shipping. We believe that focusing in that demand will play a key and essential role, and such is the case of our clients, not only at the retail stations, but B2B and B2 cities. No? So in that sense, we will be focusing in 10 or 15 cities all over the world. The region I, of course, represent is Latin America. So Latin America will be one of the regions where we will be choosing 1 or 2 cities where we get a commitment to decarbonize, we create the appropriate relationships, and we align our internal targets as BP to become a net zero company on our own, but we align our targets to the world and the agreements that are being formalized through COP26 now in Glasgow and other important associations that are key to bring us where we want to go. As I had said before, corporations are another key part. Our strategy includes focusing in technical and consumer products. We've already launched two agreements with Amazon and Microsoft. The second one is heavy transport. Heavy transport, we believe, will be essential, and this is where perhaps green hydrogen will play a fundamental role. We've signed up already with Qantas. And finally, heavy industry. Heavy industry is a very important one because their footprint, and particularly I'm going to be talking of 3 industries, which is cement, steel, and mining. The footprint of emissions is quite high. So if we work together with these companies, we can definitely work together with technology and partnerships to scale down their emissions. And most importantly, I think before starting working with them, we have to ensure that we have the right ambition, that we're aligned, and that we have complementary capabilities to ensure we can reach the targets even at a faster pace. So let's move to the next one, please. And this is my last slide. Like I said, this is a journey. We launched our strategy in February of last year, and then we had COVID, and COVID continues to be a very different issue to tackle as you move along regions. In Latin America, it's been very hard. Currently, the situation in Brazil, it's quite tough. And in Mexico, we're in a better situation. But then along, I think that the way we tackle problems is very different in each part of the world. So, and you know, I just wish to say that we have been trying to address this topic in the best way. And together with the launch of our strategy, we believe this is a journey to, just like COVID, and we're moving out of it. And we've gone through a lot of pain, a lot of changes, but we're trying to focus in a much more empathetic leadership and try to view this as a journey. So like I said, we launched our strategy previous to COVID, and a year after, we are convinced that this is the right way. You know? And not only has COVID shown us that we need to tackle things in a different way, I think the energy transition is also enhances the fact that we have a climate problem worldwide. And we need to find a real way where we use our current strategies and we include this problem in the definition of our strategy. So 1 year later, we are very proud of what we launched. We continue with this big ambition. We know it will not be easy, and a lot of changes need to happen, like the one I mentioned in BP, from transiting from an international oil company into an integrated energy company. But I think, you know, as we move along and we include in the matrix other types of energies, hydrocarbons will still be key, and we need to do them better. And gas will play a very important role, but most importantly, the consumer will also be making important choices. So again, I will end up like Liz ended. I think collaboration is the way to work, and each of the majors will be sharing many of our thoughts, many of our learnings, and this is a journey that we should tackle together. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Angelica. That is a very, very ambitious strategy that we are all looking forward to see how you succeed in implementing it and see the results. We will hopefully will be around, as you said, at least until 2030, maybe. So we will be watching the numbers and the results. So now we will go to Norway. We are so grateful that our colleague Monica, whom I met in Mexico when she was the country manager of Equinor in Mexico. She is now the VP of, let me read this because I don't want to say it wrongly. You are the VP of Safety, Security, and Sustainability. So it is a very critical job for Equinor, no question about it. And I'm so grateful that you agreed to participate in this webinar and tell us about what Equinor is strategy is. It is all your, Monica.
Thank you so much, Benigna, and thank you for the invitation. A pleasure to be here. So if we could just have my slides up. And as you said, I'm a VP for Safety, Sustainability and Security in Equinor for the Development and Production International portfolio. And today I want to talk to you a bit about our journey towards net zero. And if we go to the first slide, we support the the Paris goals and the Paris Agreement, and we recognize that the world are changing, and so are we. So what we do is that for several years now, we have had low carbon embedded in our strategy, which is always safe, high value, and low carbon. And those are three pillars that we found our decisions on. And really, the last 18 months has been a signature year and months for Equinor when it comes to our climate journey. And if we go to the next slide, we started 2020 by setting out a new climate roadmap with ambitious plans for carbon neutrality in our global emissions by 2030. And a path for near absolute zero emissions in Norway by 2050. And in November, we further strengthened that target to become a net zero energy company by 2050. And this includes emissions from our production and the final use of energy. And by setting this net zero vision for the company, it's all about contributing, and for us as an industry to contribute to reaching the Paris goals. And net zero also implies a new contract with governments, with society. As Angelica said, we need to collaborate if we are going to get to net zero. And those are the three things I want to talk about today. Because the only way we will achieve net zero is first and foremost by addressing our own emissions. And second, by working with our peers, with suppliers, and with customers. And thirdly, by being a constructive partner to governments and civil society to put in place the necessary frameworks. So if we go to the next slide to first talk about our own emissions, what are we doing? So what we have done is to strengthen our targets for decarbonization of our own production of oil and gas. And the CO2 intensity of our portfolio globally today is around 9 kilo CO2 per barrel, which is about half the industry average. And we now plan to drive this further down to 8 kilo CO2 per barrel by 2025, which is 5 years earlier than what we had initially had as an ambition. And in 2020, we also recommitted to no routine flaring and also to near zero methane emissions by 2030. And in my previous position, I headed up area development on the Norwegian shelf in Operation South. So just to give you a couple of concrete examples of what we are doing. We have a fantastic field called Johan Sverdrup on the Norwegian continental shelf, which is fully electrified, extremely low carbon emissions from that field. We also have an area solution with final investment decision where we will electrify our Sleipner multi-field installations and the wider area. And we also have now cut first steel on Hywind Tampen, which is an offshore wind farm which will provide clean energy to our Snorre and Gullfaks platforms on the Norwegian continental shelf. In addition, we are leveraging technology and our technology edge by using low carbon technology in our new developments. So that can be closed flare systems, or it could be combined cycle offshore, for example, to drive down our own emissions. So if we go to the next slide, these are the building blocks for how we plan to become net zero. It's about reducing our oil and gas emissions, optimizing our oil and gas portfolio. It's about profitable growth in renewables, and offshore wind is really one of our strengths. I'll come back to that. It's building the market opportunities in hydrogen. And lastly, natural sinks and offsets in order to get there to 2050. So if we go to the next slide, I wanted to also bring this point, since the topic of the conversation is how does oil and gas fit into the energy transition? And what we see is that as oil and gas companies going into energy companies and really broadening our portfolio, as we see this as a business opportunity as well, is that we can really leverage that oil and gas experience. We have a great experience in safe operations, in large projects and how to develop them, and to have relations with suppliers for such projects. We have the financial strength, we know how to manage risks in the portfolio, and we also can leverage local presence and also corporate capabilities globally. We also have large knowledge of marine operations and maintenance, and can really deploy this in our renewables, and also when it comes to CCS and hydrogen. So just to give an example in the next slide, I wanted to show this picture because I think they're quite impressive. We see that there are overlaps from oil and gas with technology competence needed both for renewables and also large scale CCS and eventually hydrogen. And this is just an example of Aasta Hansteen, which is one of our platform, which is built on spar technology, and the Hywind Scotland offshore wind farm that we are building, which is also built on spar technology, which shows how we can use this human capital, the skills we have, the financial capital, and also the project management to really drive big projects in this area. So if we move to the next one, I also wanted to talk about collaboration, both with partners and with government. So throughout the last 18 months, we've continued to work to drive down intensity with partners. We've agreed on new carbon intensity targets with 11 of major oil and gas companies through the Oil and Gas Climate Initiative, working with industry partners, the UN, the European Commission. We've also been part of a leadership group that has signed up in November to a new framework to monitor, report, and reduce methane emissions, including those of our joint ventures. And we also continue the rapid increase in our low and zero carbon projects, and you see some examples here. So from the joint investment decision together with Shell and Total on the Northern Lights, which is a CO2 transport and storage project, to the first IOC joint venture in offshore wind. And I had to mention this as Angelica is here, as we partnered with BP on our Empire Wind project in New York in September last year. And third, engagement with governments. At home here in Norway, we'd be very proud to be a leading partner in the Longship CCS project. And that's the largest climate project ever in the Norwegian industry. And working together with the Norwegian government, we are showing what can be achieved with public-private partnerships when it comes to the energy transition. And across the North Sea, we're also partnering with the UK government in its plan to get to net zero, which includes offshore wind, CCS, and hydrogen. And in addition to building the world's largest offshore wind farm off the English coast, we are anchor partners in Net Zero Teesside and Zero Carbon Humber. So those are two more public-private venture aimed at large-scale industrial decarbonization. So for us, this is about concrete actions and projects. And around the world, we also support getting policies in place to drive this energy transition. We support climate policies such as carbon pricing, which we know work and where we think will give a big push to the energy transition if we could have a global framework. We also support direct regulation of methane from oil and gas operation, and also incentives for renewables and low carbon solutions. So if we go to the next slide, I think we now have a huge opportunity. As Angelica said, we are still in a COVID-19 pandemic, where we have shown and we have been shown that we need to collaborate to tackle such global challenges. And that's also the case for climate change. as an industry, we need to work together, as well as with government, with civil societies, with customers, in order to get to net zero. And we now have a real opportunity to build back and to use the momentum now to also get the policy frameworks in place for the energy transition. And we've seen this now with the with the EU and the EU Green Deal, but also in the US with Biden's policy objectives. And we're really encouraged by this, and looking forward to continuing to drive this change into the energy transition. And as I said, I think that we have a really important role to play with the human capital, with the skills, with the project management, financial capital, and not least technology edge and the investments we have in technology in this energy transition. So with that, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much to you, Monica. You gave us a very uplifting view of the energy transition, where you have already made so much progress. So thank you so much for your presentation. And as you can imagine, we have many questions. And so my first question to you is going to be that probably we will have to run a little bit beyond 10 o'clock. So hopefully it will not be too much longer, but I just want you to know that. And if you have an issue, let me know. So if you have to leave at exactly at 10 o'clock. So first of all, thank you so much for all of you. And I have one question that came up for all of you is, let me actually read the question so then I don't miss the topic. Technological development and deployment are critical to successful energy transition efforts. Where do you see the greatest challenges and greatest opportunities in the coming years? So is the role of technology in this process? Who wants to start first?
I can start, Benigna.
Yeah.
I'll kick off. From the BP perspective, I think the biggest challenges are precisely that technology is evolving very fast, super fast. So you need to really make it part of your strategy, the learning process, as you take in technology and you get the new one. So I think we need to be prepared and manage uncertainty around technology is one key thing. Mm-hmm. The other one is we saw renewable energy in the last 10 years moving its capex and opex drastically. So we believe the same will happen with other technologies, for example, batteries and storage. We also believe CCUS needs to also get that, how should I call it? Even though, I mean, Monica just showed in her slides that they've been doing CCUS, and many of us since 1996, and many of us have been doing it. But I think, the economic models around CCUS still need to develop themselves along in the coming years. And last but not least, I would say green hydrogen or blue hydrogen will play a fundamental role, particularly in heavy transport. Thanks, Benigna.
Thank you. Who wants to follow answering that question?
Yeah, no, I think technology is going to be key, and we also see we have work to also reduce both CO2 and methane emissions. When you can have oversight over that through technology, you have much better data points in order to reduce your emissions and really know your sources. So that's a key, and not least when we talk about large scale CCS and transport and storage to decarbonize heavy industries and hydrogen. This is going to play a key role, but I rather see that as an upside than a challenge. I think the challenge really is to get to policy frameworks that progresses these technologies, and where we can see, like we've seen with Longship in Norway now, that we can get together as industries with governments to get the frameworks in place to actually test out the technology and deliver those projects and build the markets, because demand is there, and it's about really setting it off.
Thank you, Monica. Liz?
Yeah, I'll just add to that as well. I completely agree with your comments, Angelica and Monica. I think one of the additional challenges we'll get to is, picking those technologies that can scale, because, again, the scale of the energy landscape going future is just enormous, right? And so we're delivering not only into the demand that we have today, but a rapidly increasing energy demand as the billions of people that currently don't have access to reliable, affordable energy gain access to it, and then that sort of begets more economic growth and more demand for energy. So it's wonderful to see the explosion of technologies. I totally agree that policies that support technology development and piloting are critical, but in the end, bringing to bear the financial depth of the industry, as well as the project management and construction depth of the industry to scale these things will be critical.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Liz. Of course, we have another question here for Monica, and I will read it to you as well. Is you mentioned that offshore wind generation that you are using in your operations, could Gulf of Mexico be a laboratory for using decommissioned platforms as operating maintenance bases for clusters of floating wind towers? Wow. What do you think about that one? The Gulf of Mexico to use the wind power?
Yeah, I think that offshore US is absolutely really a sweet spot for offshore wind, and we have a large project in Empire Wind and also Beacon Wind. So we have a lot of faith in the US and offshore wind there. We also have large positions in UK, Poland, and outside of Germany, and also looking at Asia. To the specific question, I'm not sure if we have looked into that specifically. So I'll just say that US definitely offshore. We see a lot of offshore wind potential that we are now building out projects in that area together with the oil and gas productions we have in the Gulf of Mexico.
Excellent, thank you. Angelica, we have a question here for you. Are you, as a company, concerned about a renewable energy bubble where scarce green assets may become too expensive, since you are very focused on acquiring and operating renewable companies?
Yeah, I think it's linked to what Monica said now. I think definitely, I believe there will be a bubble in certain regions in terms of offshore assets, onshore assets in certain regions, for example, Brazil. I think, there could be some bubble, and I believe, prices could be higher in certain regions. Capacity factors are great in all over Latin America. There's some countries that are even better. So yes, I think that will be happening. But then again, I think we have a huge opportunity in offshore wind, like Monica mentioned, and it hasn't really been explored. She also mentioned one key thing, which is bringing in the capabilities of the upstream into wind. And I think that is absolutely true. There's a lot of synergies. We saw them in those pictures around, the optimizing offshore assets. That's a big difference between onshore and offshore assets. It's probably 10 times the price. So you need to really optimize and use, and like Lee said, really scale up, which is what offshore wind brings to the table. But then again, the other thing I would add is, I think we shouldn't be close to the fact of just producing energy in the old way we used to do. We really need to add that demand side to it, and also create energy systems that allow us to compensate the strengths and I would say weaknesses of some types of energy. So the way we're seeing it is, yes, probably there will be some higher prices because there's this trend, But the way we see the three companies that are currently sitting here, we have a very long view scenarios of the way we see projects. So it's about the long, the medium, the short, the medium, and the long term. How do we incorporate all the variables? We plug in the demand, and maybe adding governments, no? Which is one key thing, because governments will be a very important part of the offshore asset production that Monica mentioned. So yes, it will be happening, but we're seeing a lot of workarounds in terms of redefining the energy sector. Thanks.
Thank you. Liz, and I have a question for you here about, we have been hearing about your Chevron, and you mentioned it also in your presentation, the partnership with Toyota. Tell us a little bit about that relationship. What is the final objective of having that association?
Well, thank you, Benigna. So that's a relatively new development, our partnership with Toyota. And, hydrogen is such a versatile energy carrier and has great potential, but some, really strategic things have to be worked out really on the front end. So our partnership with Toyota is focused on working on three strategic areas. One is on hydrogen-related public policy measures that support the development of a hydrogen infrastructure. So you need infrastructure around hydrogen, and understanding the current, the current and future market demand for hydrogen in terms of light-duty vehicles, heavy-duty vehicles, and other uses of that fuel. And then the third piece is, figuring out jointly where we can work together on research and development in hydrogen powered transportation and storage, and just kind of looking at together where strategically, what policies are needed, what infrastructure to build out infrastructure, what R&D is needed, and where we can together then plug in that technology. And again, it's, we're stronger together on a partnership perspective. So, company like Toyota brings a whole, sector that is not Chevron. And, I really enjoyed, Angelica, your presentation, thinking about those partnerships between our companies and cities or industries to kind of solve these unique energy problems of the future.
Exactly. And that is actually one of the big advantages of partnering. And one last question I want to ask everybody is going to be, how do you face the social license in this environment? Because each one of your companies are doing different things, and you have to count that the communities are going to agree on having wind power in their backyards and or solar panels in their backyards to make this work. And I know that offshore offers a great opportunity, but there are also people who don't like to see the windmills on the coast. So let's start with Monica.
Oh, thank you. For us, the way we do business and what we do is as important as how we do, and that's a mantra for all of us, and that's how we get judged in our performance individually as well. So for us, if it's oil and gas, if it's renewables, or if it's CCS or hydrogen, this is about managing risks properly to make sure we have the least possible footprint when it comes to the environment. We have a biodiversity policy on how we will impact and contribute to that going forward as well. And we have quite strict policies and internal requirements as well on how we deal with environmental risks in our operations, be it oil and gas or renewables or CCS and other. But our industry is not without risk. So this is something that we're also very good at. And we have a role and a responsibility to build trust with the communities and societies where we operate. And I think we can only do that by walking the talk and carrying out our operations in a responsible manner.
Thank you. What about you, Angelica? How do you see BP and the social license to operate?
Yes, I think it's a great question. Liz brought it up because we already have we have COVID, we learned a lot, and we now have the energy transition, and it's about environmental and how we tackle the climate problem we have. But Liz brought in the other point, which is the social dimension, because there's a lot of people that still don't have energy. Just, in Latin America, we have this line of energy poverty. So I think, as we move along, it's key to have that as part of our strategy. We need to ensure that all our projects tackle all the issues, tackle the technical issue, get the energy that we require, either wind or upstream. We tackle the environmental issue, and we tackle the social issue, which means we enable projects that can also measure our social impact and consider communities as we move along. No? We had a big announcement yesterday. We made a partnership with Cemex, and it is a very important partnership for BP and for Cemex, because Cemex it's a Mexican company, originated in Mexico, but it's a global company with huge operations in the US and Europe. And again, I think this cooperation is not only about our ambition to energy, but our ambition towards keeping the social license and ensuring that we bring them together. We, like Monica said, we do our job as BP, but with our partners, we help them get there, but with the 3 dimensions that I mentioned. So we're ensuring that in all our partnerships, we include that social dimension. Cemex is a great example, because the way they have done their cement net zero also includes the social license. So together we can do these practices. Thanks, Bettina.
Well, thank you so much for that great example. Liz?
Well, the social license to operate in our industry has been with us for a long, long time, right? It's sort of the life of the industry. We've always had to think about the communities in which we work and that social license to operate. And I started by mentioning, right, that sort of the price of entry is safe and clean operations wherever we are around the world, whatever we're doing, and within the communities. I think that social license, it evolves over time and is sort of brought in a whole host of new above ground considerations in terms of how we're interacting with the communities in some of these new projects. And one size does not fit all. If we think we're such a global company, and as the head of exploration, we typically are sort of the front end when we're going into new places that maybe haven't had a lot of industry before and looking for new sources of hydrocarbons. Every place is unique. We bring along our corporate affairs professionals, colleagues that come in and really study what the community is, what the community needs, and then what partnerships can we form in order to create that social license to operate in that particular community. So we've worked in that space our whole lives in this industry. It evolves over time, and one size doesn't fit all. And going forward, continues to be about working with people, partnering effectively, and then in delivering performance to our shareholders as well as the people in the community.
Well, thank you so much to all of you. I know that you have commitments, so I don't want to extend this any further, but I want to thank each one of you, and I very grateful to your views about the how your companies are doing, and there are obviously several common messages here. Technology is critical. Working with people and the communities we are all working on is absolutely essential, and working with the governments is also important. So, and the technology is essential, and the deployment of the technology has to be very well thought through. And we have a history as a industry that we have developed the technologies to operate in the most complex areas. So that challenge is something that we have proven that we have the ability to work with. And as a result of that, I think that the oil and gas industry has a great future, because not only the people will need energy, continue to need all sources of energy, but also they will be very happy to be part of the development of these technologies and job opportunities and improvement of their communities. As we have said here before in this talk, there are communities that are still dealing with the fact that they don't have electricity, they don't have clean water. So those are needs that have to be addressed, and they need energy to get there. So thank you again, and we hopefully, as I said, I have several other questions, but the time is up. So thank you again, and we will be in touch.